Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up one morning, not in your familiar bedroom, but inside the cold stone walls of a medieval castle, and your royalty? Oh, it starts the way most bad ideas do with breakfast. You stumble into a musty, dirt-floored cottage in a village that doesn't have plumbing, let alone a bakery worth writing home about. Someone hands you a thick, chewy slice of dark rye bread. It's crusty on the outside and kind of sour inside with a smell that's off. You're starving, so you chew anyway. But halfway through the slice, your fingertips start to itch, then burn, then tingle like you dipped them in nettles. You might not survive. See, what no one told you, and what no one in this village knows, is that the rye crop was infected with a tiny fungus called Claviceps purpurea. It's not obvious like mold or rot. It blends in, hiding in the grooves of the grain. The fungus produces ergot, a hallucinogenic poison that causes everything from convulsions to gangrene to full-blown psychotic breaks. In some cases, it can shut off blood supply to your limbs. You didn't know your bread could amputate you, did you? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I like seeing where everyone's tuning in from around the world. Now find a comfortable place to lie down, turn on a small fan, relax, and let's start our journey tonight. Your first clue that something's wrong comes a few hours later. You're out in the fields helping the others dig up turnips, and suddenly your left hand goes numb. Not pins and needles numb. We're talking someone else's arm is attached to your body numb. A sharp cramp shoots up your elbow, then another. You drop your spade and stare at your hand. It's turning pink, then red, then kind of purplish. You stumble home. The cottage is filled with smoke from a fire that's just smoldering, not burning. There's no chimney. The air's thick. You lie down on a straw mattress that smells like wet fur, and the burning spreads up your arm. Your foot joins in too, as if your nerves are playing a sadistic game of tag. Must be St. Anthony's fire, someone mutters. You think fire, I don't remember catching fire. You pass out. Here's the thing. The people around you have no idea this is caused by a fungus. They think it's punishment, or a curse, or divine judgment from St. Anthony himself, a hermit who lived in Egypt and now has a cult following strong enough to get a disease named after him. Monks dedicated to his name build hospitals all over Europe for people like you, people with scorched limbs and wild visions. But no one questions the bread because everyone eats it and everyone's scared. Meanwhile, your body is becoming not your body. You twitch, you cry, you scream things you didn't mean to say. Your mouth tastes metallic and your skin starts peeling like you've had a bad sunburn. A local woman tries to pour oil over your legs to soothe the fire. It doesn't work. Your neighbor Lars says his cousin lost his toes after eating spoiled rye. They blackened and dropped off like dead twigs. He says this while cheerfully gnawing on the same bread. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers truly understood that rye was to blame. Some argue that local wisdom hinted at it, that during wet seasons, people whispered about cursed harvests. Others believe it took centuries to piece together the fungal connection, long after people blamed everything but their breakfast. Here's a weird fact. In small measured doses, ergot can actually be used to help with childbirth. It makes uterine muscles contract. Later in the 20th century, scientists even synthesized LSD from it. So yeah, your foot might fall off, but you might also see God and invent psychedelia. Night falls. The village settles. You can't sleep. There's a low, buzzing sound in your ears, like bees made of metal. You sit up in the dark and swear the walls are breathing. Your arm is bright red, pulsing like it has its own heartbeat. Someone cries out across the village. You hear a scream, then laughter, then nothing. In the days to come, your symptoms will shift. If you're lucky, you'll develop the dry kind of ergotism, hallucinations, seizures, maybe a violent dance or two. If you're unlucky, it's the gangrenous kind, burning dying flesh and the slow death of your limbs. There's no real treatment. Maybe a monk will pray over you. Maybe someone will put a leech on your spine. Maybe you'll be accused of sorcery. But for now, you lie still. Your stomach groans. You ate the bread, and you're starting to regret it. The strange part, no one else seems alarmed. The village has seen this before. An entire winter once, where half the town walked with a limp or missing fingers. One summer, where children ran screaming into the woods and didn't come back for hours. A baker once who tried to bake pure rye using sacred river water. His hands rotted within weeks. The door creaks open. A man with soot on his face looks in. "You feelin' the fire yet?" he asks. You just nod. Welcome to the slow burn of medieval ergotism. You're 7 years old and you're engaged. Congratulations. There's no cake, no balloons, just a long hall filled with important-looking men arguing about your future over goblets of sour wine and maps you're not allowed to touch. Somewhere in another kingdom, across a sea, or maybe a mountain range, another child is being dressed up too, your betrothed. They might be 4, they might be 10, they might be chewing on a candlestick. It doesn't matter. You're both valuable assets in the grand strategy game of medieval politics. Your marriage isn't about affection. It's about alliances, trade routes, naval access, claims to random counties nobody's ever actually visited. Historians still debate whether child betrothals were more about diplomacy or inheritance consolidation, but really it was both. And you were the adorable wedge that held empires together. The contract is written up by monks with terrible handwriting but impressive vocabulary. Latin phrases like matrimonium radum get tossed around while your parents nod solemnly. They pretend this is normal. It is. For them. For you, it's a bit much. Who is this person I'm marrying? You might whisper to your nursemaid. She shrugs. Someone with a lot of land, or a strong army. Maybe both. You go back to brushing your doll's hair and practicing your signature, because even now your signature is a weapon. It's how kingdoms fall or rise. Weird fact time. Some royal children were married by proxy. That means a grown man, usually a noble, stood in for the other child during the wedding ceremony. Yes, that means a stranger could be legally married to you while you were still chasing geese in the courtyard. He might even kiss your glove instead of your actual hand. Romantic, not exactly. Terrifying, absolutely. After the engagement comes the grooming. Not the creepy kind, hopefully, but the royal kind. You're taught the customs of your future spouse's land, their favorite saints, their national dances, their weird regional food involving eel pie or pickled fish. You are trained to be foreign, but flawlessly so. And the wedding dress, oh. You're not allowed to choose, but it will weigh as much as a saddle. It will be laced so tight that you may not breathe, but it must shimmer, it must dazzle, because you're not just a bride, you're a flag. Your wedding day arrives sooner than you expect. You haven't hit puberty, but you've memorized all your vows. Your new in-laws are smiling at you like they just bought a new horse. You've been painted, powdered, perfumed, and instructed not to faint. Your spouse also terrified, also pretending not to be. The priest's words echo like thunder, through the stone chapel. You say I do even though you're not exactly sure what you just agreed to. A bishop blesses you both, then promptly blesses the negotiations that brought this match into being. Your guests cheer. You feel vaguely dizzy. A court poet writes something sentimental while your betrothed pokes your arm awkwardly. At the feast, you're paraded like a prize goose. Everyone's drunk except you and your spouse. There are roast animals with faces still attached, jellied eels, and minstrels who don't know when to stop. Some uncle you've never met pinches your cheek and calls you Little Empress. Someone else whispers that your dowry could fund a war. Maybe it already has. And the gifts, they're diplomatic. Gold cups, embroidered cloth, ceremonial daggers, because nothing says romance like a jeweled weapon. One relative gives you a Bible so heavy it could double as a battering ram. Another, it gives you a prayer book with your new coat of arms scribbled in the margins. You are now bound, legally, religiously, geopolitically, emotionally. Not so much. The weirdest part, you may not even live together yet. Some medieval royal couples were married, but didn't cohabit until the girl hit acceptable age, usually 12 or 14. So after the celebration, you might go back to your father's castle and your new husband or wife to theirs, while everyone pretends this makes sense. But don't relax too much, because when that summons comes, when your future in-laws decide it's time, you'll be packed off with a retinue of chaperones, cooks, chamberlains, scribes, and some terrifying old dowager aunt who insists on inspecting your bedsheets every morning. You'll arrive at your new home, foreign and strange, with tapestries you don't recognize and smells you don't quite trust. You'll be expected to smile, to adapt, to remember the right honorifics for everyone, from the archbishop to the second groom of the stables. Mess it up, and you'll be branded uncivilized. Historical event drop in 1137, 15-year-old Eleanor of Aquitaine was married to Louis heir to the French throne. She was beautiful, educated, and powerful, and completely mismatched to her pious, gloomy husband. It didn't stop the wedding, of course. It only started the drama. And that's the rub. Your wedding doesn't guarantee happiness. It guarantees expectation. To bear heirs, to behave yourself, to help your new family rise, even if it means stepping on your old one. You might miss your dog. You might cry at night in a room that smells like strange incense and mildew, but you can't show it. You're royalty now, and royalty doesn't whimper. They smile with their teeth clenched and their future uncertain. So you keep your posture perfect. You say your prayers. You learn to nod at the right time during court meetings. And you wait for the next phase of your life to begin. Because now that you're married, the real business of being royal can finally begin. The wedding was a blur, an expensive, glittering, overwhelming blur. But now comes the part that really matters, at least to your new in-laws, the consummation. No, you don't get privacy. See, in the wonderfully invasive world of medieval royalty, marriage isn't considered truly complete until it's physically consummated. In fact, if it isn't, the marriage can be annulled. Convenient, right? For kings and queens who regret political decisions extremely. Which brings us to tonight. You've been led, no paraded through the halls of your new castle in a ceremonial procession. The guests are still drunk from the feast. The minstrels are still at it. You're still woozy from the wine you weren't allowed to refuse. And now you're in your bedchamber sitting awkwardly on a mattress stuffed with feathers and expectations. Your new spouse sits beside you, just as bewildered, maybe whispering something like, "Do we actually have to do this?" Short answer, yes. Long answer, Yes, with witnesses. Weird historical fact. In many medieval courts, royal consummations were semi-public. Witnesses, usually clergy, and noble advisors would escort the couple to the bedchamber, bless the sheets, and sometimes even stay in the room to make sure everything happened. At the very least, they'd demand the stained linens the next morning as proof. No pressure. You lie back under heavy velvet covers embroidered with your new family crest. The fire crackles in the hearth, and 4 candles flicker on gold stands. A woman you just met today adjusts your pillows. An old bishop blesses the bed in Latin. Someone giggles, you do not, your spouse. They look about as terrified as you feel. Eventually, the room empties. You exhale, but you still feel their eyes, their expectations, their breathless curiosity waiting just beyond the door. There's no guidebook for this, no comforting words from your mother, just duty tradition and a lot of really unflattering advice from aging courtiers. Historians still debate whether consummation ceremonies were more symbolic than literal, especially for very young couples. In some cases, the two were simply tucked into bed together and left alone, gesture over function. In others, well, there were instructions. The next morning, whether something happened or not, there's a performance. A servant dramatically carries out the bed linens to be inspected for blood. Courtiers whisper, some cheer, others pretend not to care. You meanwhile are exhausted from pretending everything is normal. It's not. This is your life now. You're expected to take your place as a royal spouse immediately. That means sitting beside your husband or wife in court, smiling politely during diplomatic audiences and nodding sagely while someone explains how much grain was harvested from a field you've never even seen. Occasionally, your spouse whispers something to you. Sometimes it's sweet. Other times it's just, what's this guy's name again? You're learning on the job fast. Your new family watches your every move, your posture, your table manners, whether or not you really bowed low enough to the archbishop. Even the way you walk becomes a matter of palace gossip. Are you too proud? Too slow? Are your skirts too long? Your laugh too loud? It's exhausting. And just as you're settling in, the whispers begin. When will she be pregnant? That's the unspoken countdown that starts the moment you're married. Everyone wants an heir, preferably male, preferably yesterday. You feel like a walking womb with a crown. Courtiers bring you charms, fertility prayers, and sometimes unsettling relics like a saint's finger bone to sleep beside. A few superstitious midwives recommend eating roasted doves or bathing in moonlit milk. You're not sure what's worse, the pressure to conceive or the potions they bring you to help. Meanwhile, your spouse. He's trying his best to be kingly or queenly, but neither of you really knows what you're doing. You're barely out of childhood expected to act like seasoned rulers. The days are filled with ceremony councils and long silent meals with people twice your age who think you're decoration. Historical moment alert. In 1308, King Edward II of England married Isabella of France. She was only 12, though the marriage wasn't consummated right away. Thankfully, Isabella was still expected to act the part of a queen, attending court functions, listening in on council meetings, and keeping quiet about Edward's intense friendships. You're living in a gilded fishbowl. Even the bedchamber isn't safe. Your maids are spies. Your attendants report your moods. If you're too sad, you're melancholic. Too happy, frivolous. Too quiet, plotting. Too loud, unqueenly. There's no winning, only surviving. And yet there are strange, soft moments too, like the night your spouse whispers something funny, and you both laugh until the candles burn low. Or when they fall asleep with their head on your shoulder, and for a minute it feels like you're just two teenagers trying to make sense of all this. The next morning, it's back to titles and expectations. But you remember that laugh, and maybe, just maybe, something resembling affection begins to grow not from love at first sight, but from navigating the same impossible maze together. You might even steal a moment alone in the gardens where no one calls you majesty, and you can finally take a deep breath without the weight of a crown crushing your lungs. For now the marriage is official. You've passed the first test, but more are coming, because once the ceremony is over, the performance never ends. The castle wakes before you do. Servants tiptoe through the halls with buckets of water and trays of bread. Fires are lit in your chambers, while the windows still hold the chill of night. But when you're royalty, you don't get to wake up slowly. You are awoken politely but firmly by a lady-in-waiting who parts your velvet bed curtains with the delicacy of someone poking a bear. You blink at the morning light, slicing through the stained glass windows already painted in gold and crimson by the sun. You're still tangled in layers of embroidered nightgown and dreams of being a commoner. But that luxury vanishes the moment your feet hit the cold, rush-strewn stone floor. It's time to be seen. There's no such thing as privacy in a medieval royal morning. Your personal servants file in to help you dress, and that's not a quick affair. First the chemise, then the kirtle, then the overdress, then the girdle, then the mantle. Don't forget the veil or circlet. If you're a man, you're wearing tights, a doublet, a robe, maybe a fur collar, maybe a sword, even if you've never touched one outside of ceremonies. If it's a religious holiday, you might be laced into something that feels more altar than outfit. And yes, it takes a village to get dressed. At least 4 people for the gown, another 2 for the hair, 1 to polish your shoes, which you'll never walk in more than 20 feet. Being royal is mostly standing still while people fuss with buckles as you're being cinched and primped. Someone reads you your schedule. You're expected at morning mass, a council session, a legal petition, hearing a diplomatic lunch with the Venetian ambassador, and a public walk through the gardens. That's all before dinner. Historians still debate whether royal daily life was truly as regimented as some surviving schedules suggest, or if much of the pomp was more improvisational. Either way, you don't get to skip any of it. The chapel is cold and smells like wax and incense. You kneel in front of a jewel-encrusted altar and pretend you're not still thinking about the dream you had, something about climbing a tree and stealing a pie. You make the sign of the cross, whisper the Latin prayers you've said since you were 3, and glance sideways at your spouse, who is trying and failing not to yawn. After Mass, it's time for council. This is where real power lives, old men in robes debating grain taxes, border disputes, dowry payments, and which distant cousin might be scheming for your throne. You try to look regal and engaged. You nod slowly, occasionally murmur "indeed," and scribble symbols into the wax tablet on your lap so it looks like you're taking notes. One lord is demanding more soldiers. Another complains that a neighboring duchess insulted his pigs. And somewhere in between, someone proposes a new tax on salt. You blink, slowly count the minutes, and wonder if it would be treason to fake a fainting spell. Weird historical fact. Some monarchs, like King Henry VI of England, were so uninterested in governance that courtiers would stage entire meetings with dummy paperwork just to keep up appearances. After council, you're ushered into the Hall of Petitions. This is a semi-public ritual where peasants, clergy, and minor nobles present their problems before you. You sit on a throne so large it makes your feet dangle like a child's. People bow, they kneel, they weep, and you must respond with grave kindness, unless, of course, the request involves money. Then you must frown and say, "We shall consider it." A woman begs for her son to be pardoned. A knight demands payment for his service in some skirmish you've never heard of. A baker accuses the steward of stealing flour. You listen, nod, and repeat the phrase that solves everything: "It shall be looked into." It won't be. Eventually, mercifully, it's time for lunch. But remember, this is court lunch, not lunch. There are 30 dishes, 2 processions, and a choir. You're seated on a raised dais next to your spouse, who whispers, "Are we allowed to chew yet?" You smile at the nobles. You sip watered wine. You pretend to be delighted by a pomegranate you didn't ask for. The food is impressive if confusing. Swans molded out of marzipan. Stew served in hollowed-out bread loaves. One course is just vegetables carved into flowers. But your appetite is fragile. Every bite is watched. Every glance is interpreted. Eat too little and you're sick. Too much and you're indulgent. After the meal, you're expected to promenade. Yes, walk publicly, through the gardens or courtyard. You hold hands with your spouse, wave at the townsfolk gathered beyond the gates, and stop to smell the same rose you pretended to admire yesterday. Historical side note: Queen Elizabeth of Hungary was famed for her royal walks among the poor, distributing bread and coins. Though legend says one day, when caught with food under her cloak, the loaves miraculously turned into roses. Probably not your luck today. Back inside, there's more ritual. Maybe you oversee the swearing in of a knight. Maybe you sit for a painter. Maybe you practice dancing for a feast, wearing shoes with soles so thick they feel like stilts. But there's no lounging, no reading a novel by a window. Novels haven't been invented yet, and even if they had, your job is visibility, not escapism. By evening, your feet hurt, your smile has stiffened, and your crown, literal or figurative, is a weight you carry in the set of your shoulders and the ache in your neck. But still, you sit at dinner, hosting another round of nobles, musicians, foreign dignitaries, and gossip merchants. You sip, nibble, nod, laugh at jokes that weren't funny even in Latin. Eventually, blessedly, the feast ends. You are escorted once more to your chambers. The ladies unlace your gown. The fire's down to glowing embers. A warm bath finally is drawn from a brass tub by candlelight, and as you slide beneath the water, the perfume of rose oil filling the room, you let yourself exhale, because this at last is yours. A moment in silence, a moment in softness, a brief escape from performance until the cycle begins again tomorrow. You're pregnant now, or at least everyone hopes you are. It's hard to say for sure. There are no reliable tests, and you're not allowed to say anything until someone official deems your nausea sufficiently royal. But the whispers have started. The court midwives hover like vultures. The steward of wine discreetly replaces your goblet with watered raspberry vinegar. Even your shoes are swapped out for softer, flatter ones. All signs point to one terrifying truth. You might be carrying the future of the kingdom, and no pressure, but it better be a boy. You don't get to enjoy this pregnancy in peace. Every kick, every craving, every groan is subject to interpretation. If you want sweets, some old crone says it's a girl. If you're grumpy, must be a boy. Someone brings you a charm made of dried mole feet. Another insists on reading psalms over your belly at dawn. Everyone has an opinion, nobody has a clue, and of course you still have to work. Royal duties don't pause for morning sickness. You're expected at every mass feast, and public appearance until you're visibly waddling, and even then, you'll be hoisted into a litter and paraded through town like a sacred vessel. Weird historical fact. In the late Middle Ages, some royal women were believed to emit a glow when pregnant, a divine sign of fertility. Midwives would sometimes keep a silver mirror beside the queen's bed to detect heavenly luminescence. Spoiler, it was just oily skin and candlelight. Eventually, once your belly has made it impossible to pretend you aren't pregnant, the court shifts. Everyone begins addressing you differently. My lady becomes my lady mother. Every lady in waiting becomes unbearably excited. Some of the older ones start crocheting. Your husband walks more upright. You, however, feel like a beached whale in a corset. Now begins your lying in. This is the part where you're technically allowed to rest, but the catch is you must do it ritually. For 6 weeks before your expected delivery, you're shut away in a darkened chamber known as the confinement room. The windows are covered, the walls draped in tapestries, no men allowed. The only light comes from beeswax candles and the Virgin Mary painted over your bed. It's meant to be holy. It feels like prison. There's a designated priest who drops by to pray. There are soft-footed midwives who speak only in whispers. And there are attendants, so many attendants, whose job is to keep you calm and chaste of mind. No excitement, no reading anything too stimulating, just embroidery psalms and staring at the wall while people debate your dilation status. Historians still debate whether these confinements were more about tradition or control. Some suggest they provided rest and safety in an era of high maternal mortality. Others see them as a way to keep royal women sequestered, silent, and out of the way during their most vulnerable weeks. Either way, you miss fresh air. Labor begins in the middle of the night. Your groans are met with gentle prayers. The room fills with women. The air turns thick with sweat, incense, and fear. A silver crucifix is placed in your hand. Holy relics line the bed. There is no anesthesia, no knowledge of germs. Just linen cloths, sharp knives, and whispered instructions. The midwives chant. One shouts. Your back arches, your vision swims. You scream and hope to God the baby cries. Historical note, Queen Jane. Seymour, third wife of Henry VIII, delivered a son, but died 12 days later. Others, like Margaret of Anjou, survived harrowing labors only to have their sons torn from them by politics. Even queens weren't safe from the dangers of childbirth. But today you live, and the baby cries. A boy. The news explodes like fireworks across the kingdom. Church bells ring. Riders dash through villages, announcing the good news. Nobles flock to court bearing gifts. Someone releases a cage of doves. It's as if the Virgin herself just winked. You meanwhile are barely conscious, pale, bleeding, trembling from fever. But no one speaks of that. Your job is done. Almost. There's one final ritual, the churching of women. 40 days after giving birth, you must be ceremonially cleansed and reintroduced to public life. The church declares you pure, again allowed to walk among courtiers and men. It's a mix of gratitude and superstition, half sacred, half societal reset. You kneel, you pray, you are blessed and forgiven for the sin of nearly dying to produce a male heir. Then the court parties. There's a christening feast, a naming ceremony. Your son is paraded through the halls, swaddled in gold-threaded blankets, kissed by bishops, toasted by knights. You sit on your throne still stitched from your delivery and try to look delighted. No one tells you how to feel. You're a queen, not a mother. Feelings are private. Appearances are policy. Later, when the guests are drunk and the musician's off key, you sneak into the nursery. Just for a moment, just to see him alone. Your son, your miracle, your bargaining chip. He sleeps with his mouth open. His tiny hand curls around your finger. He has your eyes. And for the first time in weeks, you cry. Not from pain or fear or pressure, but from something soft, quiet, and dangerously human, love. But the cradle is already surrounded by expectations. He will be king someday, or married off, or marched into war. You can't protect him from that. All you can do is tuck the blanket tighter and kiss his forehead before slipping back into your chamber. The crown is heavy, even in your bedclothes. You don't raise your own children. Let's get that out of the way. You're a royal. Your kids are too important for something as unpredictable as maternal affection. The moment they're born, they're whisked away not to be abandoned, but to be properly managed. Wet nurses, governesses, tutors, confessors, herbalists. Your child's new family is a rotating cast of professionals with ironed sleeves and solemn voices. You, their actual parent, are somewhere down the list. Below protocol, but just above court musician. The nursery is a world unto itself. It smells like honeyed porridge, lavender, and old stone. Every surface is padded, every fire carefully tended. The royal cradle is carved from oak and inlaid with silver, part crib, part shrine. The child sleeps beneath icons of saints and banners bearing family heraldry. The dynasty begins here, the tapestries whisper. But don't expect giggles and lullabies. A royal baby is a political time bomb wrapped in velvet. Their health is monitored like crop yield. Did they burp? Good. Do they have a fever? Call the priest. Are they left-handed? Better train that out early. It's suspicious. Every tooth rash and sneeze becomes court gossip. If your baby so much as cries off schedule, someone suggests you pray harder. Historians still debate whether medieval royal parents truly loved their children or merely saw them as dynastic tools. But the line between love and legacy was thin, dangerous even. Letting love interfere with strategy was a rookie mistake, and strategy rules everything here. By the time your child can crawl, they've already been promised in marriage. Maybe to a duke's daughter, maybe to the cousin of a rival king, maybe to someone they'll never meet until their wedding day. Or maybe, let's be real, never meet at all if one party dies of plague before puberty. But the alliance will stand. Weird historical fact, in 1441, Henry VI of England was betrothed to Margaret of Anjou in a treaty negotiation before he'd ever met her. The dowry negotiations took longer than the actual wedding. And what about you? You visit the nursery from time to time, sure. You kneel beside the cradle. You trace a finger along their cheek. You smile, then glance at the nursemaid, the steward, the guard at the door. Nothing is private, not even a mother's glance. You kiss your child goodnight, rise and return to your chambers where state matters await, and another audience must be held. Once your child is weaned and walking, it's time for their formal education. The boys are trained to rule. Latin, law, theology, heraldry, falconry, swordplay. They're expected to learn how to manage estates, lead armies, negotiate treaties, quote the Psalms, and argue over salt taxes. At 6, the girls are prepared to marry. Needlework, music, modesty, French poetry. They're coached on how to speak in soft tones, walk with grace, pour wine without trembling, and survive childbirth. Their biggest lesson, obedience. You watch your daughter curtsy for a visiting baron. Her dress is too tight. Her eyes are too bright. She's only 7 and already smiling like a porcelain doll. Your son, meanwhile, smacks another boy with a wooden sword and is praised for his royal instincts. At night, you sit alone by the fire, letters from foreign courts in your lap. A cousin in Navarre is proposing a match. A duchess in Bavaria has offered a falcon in exchange for a marital pact. You haven't seen your own child in days, but you've signed the 3 letters arranging their future. This is love, medieval style, distant, diplomatic, desperate, but sometimes the cracks show. You hear crying in the garden. A tiny voice you recognize. Your daughter has fallen from a tree, a forbidden one, of course, and scraped her knee. The governess is in a panic. The healer is whispering about rose oil. The priest is citing psalms. You ignore them all. You kneel. You gather your daughter in your arms and rock her gently the way your own nurse once did. She sniffs. Am I in trouble? You shake your head. Only with God. And he's busy. She giggles. You bandage her leg yourself. The court stares. You don't care. You are royal, but you are also a mother, and sometimes you get to act like it. Back inside, someone reminds you that appearances must be maintained. There's a feast tonight. You must look radiant. You must not mention the garden. You must not seem tired or tender. You nod. You understand. Still, you press a kiss to your daughter's forehead and leave her with a tiny carved unicorn stolen from your old jewelry box. She won't remember this moment, but you will. Strange but true. Some queens kept hidden keepsakes. Dolls, letters, carved figurines to remind themselves of their children during long separations. One such object, a wooden doll found in Eleanor of Castile's effects, was so worn it had lost its paint. You think of that doll later as you sit at the feast. The musicians play, the nobles toast, the fire roars. Your husband argues about wool tariffs. Your daughter waves from the gallery above, dressed like a doll herself. Your son stabs a roast pigeon with ceremonial flair, and you smile the practiced smile of a ruler who understands that love and legacy do not always walk hand in hand. You lift your goblet, you raise it high. To the children, everyone cheers, and none of them know how much you mean it. You're not just a queen, you're a matchmaker, a diplomat, a strategist with a smile, and right now your job is to marry someone off. Not yourself, thank God. You've already played that game. No, this time, the crown needs a marriage alliance, and someone, maybe your daughter, maybe your nephew, maybe a cousin, twice removed, who can play the lute, is going to become a pawn on the great chessboard of Europe. You sit in the council chamber beneath a tapestry of St. George, slaying the dragon, while a man with too many rings explains why it would be highly advantageous to wed your niece to the Duke of somewhere you've never heard of his third son. He has a fine falcon, the man adds, as if that seals it. Weird historical fact, a 15th century noblewoman once turned down a marriage offer because the groom's front teeth were irregular. The alliance collapsed. His falcon, by the way, was exceptional. You nod sagely, but your mind is elsewhere. You're calculating. If this girl marries into that family, you'll secure trade rights to their wine. But the dowry, you'll have to part with that parcel of land near the river. Worth it, maybe. Maybe not. But that's the game. In medieval royalty, marriage is war by other means. Your daughter, of course, hasn't been consulted. She's 14. She's in the solar reading poetry in a window seat. She dreams of troubadours and dashing knights. You remember that kind of dreaming. It doesn't last long, not in castles. Mother, she says when you tell her, he's 42. You give the approved speech duty alliance glory for the realm. She doesn't cry. She curtsies. That's worse. Arrangements are made, letters sent, portraits exchanged. Her future husband is described as spirited, which usually means gouty and argumentative. He writes her a sonnet. His secretary probably penned it. Your daughter reads it aloud, smiling like a hostage. Historians still debate whether royal women internalized this role or rebelled against it in private. Diaries are rare. Smiles are easier to record than sighs. Now comes the betrothal ceremony. This is the warm-up wedding, complete with rings, a sermon, and a feast. The actual groom is still on the continent, so a symbolic stand-in, his cousin maybe, or a handsome knight, is presented for the public show. Your daughter places her hand in his. The priest blesses them. Everyone claps. The next day she leaves. She'll travel with an entourage of wagons guards and priests. Her trousseau includes enough linen to shroud a village. The dowry is tucked into a chest with a lock forged by the royal smith. You whisper instructions to the chief lady-in-waiting. Make sure she eats. Make sure she sleeps. Make sure she remembers who she is. Your daughter looks back once from the saddle. Her face is unreadable. You wave. The court waves. The gates close. She's gone. You return to your chamber. There's a letter waiting. Another match proposed. This one for your second son. He's 11. The bride's 7. The match could unite 2 powerful duchies. You pick up the quill, begin to write, and then you stop, because you remember being that girl once, young, dressed in ivory, smiling at strangers, listening to your mother's final advice echo in your ears like bells. Do your duty. Obey your lord. Do not cry. You didn't cry then, but you do now, and that too is duty. Private tears for public bargains. Strange but true, royal weddings were so politically charged that some were conducted before the couple had ever seen each other in person. In one case, a Spanish princess fainted upon meeting her future husband. He was 3 inches shorter and 12 years older than the portrait had implied. Later, your daughter writes you a letter. She says the weather is cold, but the castle is beautiful. She says her husband is kind, and his cough has improved. She says she misses the roses in the courtyard. You keep the letter. You read it when no one is watching. You wonder what she really meant. Time passes. She sends gifts, lacework, scented oils, a little carved horse for her younger brother. She sends portraits of herself with her new household, always smiling, always draped in brocade. One day she sends news. She's expecting. You kneel in the chapel that night. You light a candle. You pray that the child is healthy, that the labor is short, that your daughter survives. That's all a queen can do. Pray, plan, and place the next piece on the board, because there's always another match to be made. You wake to trumpets, not because there's war, no, that would almost be easier. The trumpets signal something far more exhausting, a royal feast day. It's your son's name day, or your wedding anniversary, or perhaps the anniversary of some ancestor's marginally successful conquest of a swampy province. The reason doesn't matter. What matters is that by sundown there will be goblets raised, animals roasted, and minstrels sweating through their collars, trying to rhyme Aquitaine with champagne. You groan. The bed is warm. The chambermaids are not sympathetic. They peel back your blankets like stagehands prepping an actress. You're a monarch, you must perform. As you're bathed, oiled, and robed in 4 layers of stiff, ceremonial fabrics, the chamber bustles with stylists, heralds, and 1 courtier who's only there to hold your dog. Someone's polishing your shoes with goose fat. Someone else whispers that the bishop is already in the chapel, growing impatient. You nod graciously. You suppress the urge to throw a pillow. Weird historical fact. Some medieval queens wore dresses so wide they required assistants to help them turn corners in narrow hallways. One chronicler described a noblewoman getting stuck in a church door during a feast day mass and having to be yanked backward by 4 footmen. The procession begins. You walk through corridors strewn with fresh rushes. Tapestries flutter, courtiers bow, servants line the walls like nervous candles. The chapel doors creak open, revealing a sea of faces. Your husband waits at the altar, already halfway into a yawn he'll pretend was a prayer. You kneel, you rise, you listen as the bishop drones through psalms. You catch your daughter whispering to a page boy and silently vow to bring that up later. Finally, you're released into daylight. Time for the main event. The feast. It's held in the Great Hall, a towering echo chamber of banners, antlers, and firelight. The scent of roasting meat hits you first. Boar, swan, venison, peacock with feathers reattached for flair. Platters gleam. Bread is carved into shapes. Someone presents you with a subtlety, a sugar sculpture of a ship sailing through icing waves. You smile, as if it's the first ship you've ever seen. The high table is raised above the rest. You take your place beside the king, who's already fishing dates out of his goblet with a spoon. He leans toward you and murmurs, "They overcooked the eel again." You nod. You don't care. You're watching your son across the room, holding court with the young knights, and already mimicking his father's hand gestures. You've trained him too well. Historians still debate whether royal feasts were truly as decadent as the surviving menus suggest, or if the records were exaggerated for posterity. One thing's certain, nobody left hungry or sober. As the meal continues, entertainment begins. Jugglers, fire eaters, troubadours, dwarfs in costume. A bear is paraded through the hall to gasps and applause. Someone recites a poem comparing your beauty to the moon. Someone else drops a lute. It's chaos, but elegant chaos wrapped in pageantry and pretension. You're bored, of course. You always are. But boredom is part of the job. You raise a goblet to toast the guests. You say something about honor legacy and the boundless blessings of the realm. Everyone cheers. Somewhere in the crowd, someone starts clapping offbeat. Then comes the gift parade. Every noble in attendance presents you with something velvet pearls, books, animals. One baron gifts you a pair of pure white doves. They immediately relieve themselves on your gown. You smile anyway, strange but true. One German duchess once gifted a royal bride a taxidermied swan wearing a gold necklace. It sat on her writing desk until the feathers fell out. Finally, hours later, the banquet ends, or so you think. Now comes the dancing. The musicians shift into a galliard. The hall is cleared. You're expected to dance the first steps with your husband, a performance of grace and harmony, even if your marriage is mostly frost and formalities. He offers his hand. You accept. The crowd watches, and for 3 minutes you forget everything. The music lifts you. The torches shimmer. The crown is heavy, yes, but your feet are light. You remember being 17, being twirled beneath a candelabra by a man who still had dreams. He smiles. So do you. Then the dance ends. The dream recedes. You return to your seat. Your back aches. Your crown tilts. Your ears ring. But the feast has done its job. The nobles are fat and content. The alliances are intact. The court is dazzled. The realm for now is at peace. You slip away before the last course. Back to your chambers. Your slippers are kicked off. Your gown unfastened. You sit by the window rubbing your temples. Down in the courtyard, the music plays on. You see your children sneaking scraps from the kitchens. You see the torches flickering in the dusk. You hear laughter, and for a moment, you let the mask fall. Because beneath the silks, the jewels, and the rituals, you are just a woman. Tired, proud, afraid, hopeful. A queen, yes. But more than that, a human being. And tomorrow, it all starts again. You might think that the throne room is where the real power happens. But no, it's the council chamber. That smoke-stained room with the long table, the uncomfortable chairs, and the constant scent of candle wax and old parchment. That's where kingdoms are built or broken, and you're in it. Again, today's agenda: everything. The grain shortage in the north, a bishop's request for a new monastery, a dispute between two nobles over a duck pond that apparently sparked bloodshed. You sip weak wine not at the right moments and quietly doodle in the margins of a diplomatic letter. It's the only rebellion you're allowed today. You're not just royalty, you're management. Weird historical fact. King Edward I of England once spent more than a decade issuing over 20,000 government documents, often dictating while on horseback. Medieval paperwork was real endless and often done in transit. Your husband sits at the head of the table, fiddling with his signet ring, occasionally mumbling something about tradition or God's will. The chancellor drones, the marshal yawns, the treasurer is visibly sweating. You, however, are fully alert, because here's the truth: behind every sluggish meeting is one sly political opportunity, and you don't miss them. A young envoy from a rebellious barony makes a comment careless, almost disrespectful. You catch it, you smile, you ask for clarification in a tone so sweet it could ferment. He fumbles, the room shifts, a warning softly delivered. Later the king will say, "You were brilliant today." You'll say, "I was tired." Both are true. Historians still debate whether queens held real power or merely influenced policy through their husbands. In your case, the answer is yes. You advise, you negotiate. You occasionally save the entire realm by preventing your lord from declaring war over someone's insulted falcon. But no one writes ballads about that. Instead, they write about swords and sieges. You've seen both. They're loud, they're bloody, they're simple. Court politics, though, that's the real battlefield. You recall a time not long ago when your son came to you furious. A rival duke insulted his swordsmanship during a hunt. The boy wanted blood. You gave him bread. "Eat first," you said, "then think." He did. The duel was avoided, the insult forgotten. You still remember the look in your son's eyes, half resentment, half awe. That was the moment he started to understand what it really means to rule. Ruling isn't about waving a sword. It's about knowing when not to draw it. Back in the council, the conversation shifts to taxes. Your favorite, a merchant guild, is demanding fewer tolls on their imported velvet. The nobility wants higher tariffs on anything foreign. The peasants, meanwhile, would just like to eat. No one speaks for them except you, quietly. You suggest a seasonal compromise. The steward raises an eyebrow. The bishop sighs. But the room tilts toward your idea. You've given everyone just enough to save face. That's politics. Give them something shiny, and they'll forget they came for gold. Strange but true. Queen Margaret of Denmark was known to govern 3 kingdoms at once, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, in the 14th century through sheer political finesse and backroom negotiation. She held it all together with meetings just like these. Of course, court politics isn't just about land titles or grain. It's also about people. You manage egos like you manage rooms with ventilation. A word here, a compliment there. You keep track of who sat where at dinner, who frowned at whom during prayer, who switched goblets and why. Gossip is currency. Memory is power. At night, you review the day with your chief lady-in-waiting. She's sharp. She notices things even you miss. Who blushed when your daughter entered, who slipped a note beneath the wine pitcher, who never stood for the bishop's blessing. You tuck these facts away like daggers in silk. Later, as you undress by candlelight, you catch your reflection in the mirror. A queen, a diplomat, a chess master in pearls. No one sees how tired you are, how heavy the crown sits, not just on your head, but on your heart, because every decision you made today will echo tomorrow. And if you're wrong, someone else pays the price. Maybe a farmer loses his land. Maybe a widow loses her pension. Maybe a child doesn't make it through the winter because velvet was more important than oats. You swallow hard. You light a candle. You pray, but not for mercy, for clarity. Because if you're going to carry this kingdom on your back, you need to know exactly where your feet are stepping. In the end, kings may get the glory, but queens carry the consequences. There's a knock at your chamber door. 3 soft raps the signal. You know what it means. A death has come to the castle. It's the royal midwife. Pale, tight-lipped. You already know. You don't need to hear the words. Another child lost. Not yours this time, but close. A niece, a cousin, a girl of 16 who barely finished her first embroidery sampler. The corridors are quiet. A few murmurs. No wailing. That will come later in the chapel. In the medieval court, death is never far. It waits behind the curtains. It rides behind every hunting party. It lingers in the kitchens. Even in palaces lined with gold, the air can sour with grief in a single hour. Weird historical fact. In the 14th century, a single royal household might bury half its children before they reached age 5. Smallpox, measles, and bad water didn't discriminate between serf and sovereign. You don your mourning veil again. This isn't your first. Won't be your last. You've buried siblings, cousins, your own children. You remember each name, though the chroniclers often do not. History has a habit of summarizing heartache into died young. There's a small chapel service. The priest mumbles Latin. The incense burns your throat. You sit still, eyes fixed on the stained glass. The queen must not cry, but you do, quietly. The kind of tears that burn behind the eyes instead of spilling. After the mass, you slip away, down a narrow hall, up a tower staircase. You need air, distance, silence. At the top, you find it the herbalist's garden, a patch of green atop cold stone. Rosemary for remembrance, rue for sorrow, lavender for sleep. You breathe it in. You let your shoulders fall. Historians still debate whether medieval queens found private ways to grieve, or whether they were trained from youth to suppress it entirely. Some personal letters suggest genuine emotion. Others are ghost-written, formal, and stiff. A breeze lifts your veil. For a moment, you feel like yourself. Not a queen, just a woman whose heart has grown too heavy from too many funerals. You remember when your own child died, the little boy who loved birds, who once tied a ribbon around a dove's leg and tried to train it to deliver messages. The castle steward scolded him. You laughed. He died at 6. Fever in the winter. You still keep the ribbon. In the weeks that followed, you couldn't bear the sound of wings. Back in your chambers, someone's left you a note. Another diplomatic envoy has arrived. There's to be a banquet. You're expected to wear blue, because grief doesn't pause the kingdom. You dress, you smile, you go. At the feast, the minstrels play something cheerful. The courtiers laugh too loudly. The meat is underdone. The wine is spiced with cinnamon. You go through the motions. You nod. You pretend to enjoy the sugared plums. But your mind drifts. You wonder about that niece, what her voice sounded like, what her favorite song was, whether she was afraid at the end. Strange but true, royal tombs were often shared by multiple family members. It wasn't uncommon for queens to be buried beside children they outlived or never got to name. Later alone again, you visit the crypt. It's not dramatic. No thunder, no tears, just the soft shuffle of shoes on stone and the echo of your own breath. You kneel, you light a candle, you whisper, maybe her name, maybe a prayer, maybe nothing at all. It's not just the dead you mourn, it's the life she didn't get to have. The spring festivals, the tapestries she might have made, the awkward betrothal to some duchy's second son, the children she'll never name, the grief she was spared. That's the awful irony. Death ends pain, yes, but it steals every joy too. You leave the crypt, you don't look back. Tomorrow you'll hold court again. You'll smile again. You'll greet a visiting bishop and pretend not to notice the way he stares. You'll approve another grain tax. You'll scold your son for stealing hawk feathers. You'll listen to your husband snore through another sermon, because that's what you do. That's how you survive. But tonight, in the quiet hush of the tower garden, with rosemary brushing your gown and lavender clinging to your sleeves, you let yourself remember. And for once, that's enough. It's a cold morning, but the hall is stifling. You're trapped in brocade, sitting on a too-stiff chair, listening to two lords argue about pig paths. Yes, pig paths. Lord Morton claims his swine are being herded across Lord Aubrey's land. Aubrey insists the pigs in question are not Morton's pigs, but wild. Morton says wild pigs don't wear bells. You sip your wine slowly and fantasize about exile. Welcome to the real work of royalty. Not battles, not balls, bureaucracy. The myth of medieval monarchs leading lives of endless drama and romance is charming but false. Much of your day is spent navigating a blizzard of parchment and personality disorders. Weird historical fact, in the 14th century, King Edward III handled thousands of administrative petitions annually. Everything from land disputes to requests for pardons crossed his table. He even had a department just for dealing with lost dogs. Your version, you're head of the Department of Silly Disputes and Eternal Patience. Later that day, a monk arrives with a report. One of your abbeys has collapsed. Literally collapsed. The north wall gave way after a storm. No one was hurt, but a relic of Saint Winifred is now buried under 12 tons of stone. The bishop is furious. He wants funds. You don't have funds. You do have 3 cracked aqueducts, a rusting trebuchet, and 5 noble families you're trying to stop from marrying their cousins again. Historians still debate whether queens were true administrators or figureheads placed beside bureaucrats. In truth, queens often became the bureaucrats, especially in regency or widowhood. Paperwork didn't care if you wore a crown. You pushed through. There's a wedding to approve, a fish market charter to renew, a tapestry commission to finalize. You barely have time to eat. Dinner is cheese, a few walnuts, and wine. Always wine. You sit at your writing desk, dabbing wax seals and blinking through candlelight. Someone knocks. Your steward. He holds a letter like it's made of thorns. It's from your sister. You exhale. You'd almost forgotten she existed. She lives in another kingdom now, married off years ago. She writes rarely. This letter is short. Her husband is ill. Her children are grown. She misses you. You remember when the two of you danced barefoot in the kitchens at age 12. The head cook threatened to tan your hides. You ran all the way to the tower, laughing, flower in your hair. Now you both sit on thrones in different lands, surrounded by servants and suitors and sadness. You write her back. It's short too. Come if you can. The lavender's blooming again. You wonder if she'll understand the old signal. Strange but true. Some royal siblings kept secret codes in their letters, words or flowers that carried meaning only they knew. Lavender for sorrow, marjoram for forgiveness, rosemary for trust. You light a candle for her, just in case. The next morning, your son asks if you'll teach him how to read court documents. He's 11, sharp as a hawk, already bored of swordplay. You pull a pile of parchment toward you and say, "Let's start with land grants." He groans. You grin. You explain the symbols, the seals, the meanings behind each clause. You teach him to look for lies in the margins and bribes in the phrasing. He's too young to wield a sword of steel. But this is the other sword, the one no one teaches, unless you know how heavy it really is. Hours pass. He reads. He stumbles. He tries again. And you remember your father doing the same for you. It's a quiet joy, one of the few royal ones that aren't weighed down by performance or protocol. You hope he remembers this moment. You know you will. That night, the court hosts a poetry competition. 4 bards, 3 lutes, 1 jester, and a goat, don't ask, perform verses meant to charm, seduce, and amuse. The halls echo with laughter. The goat wins. Somehow, you laugh too. Genuinely this time. You needed this. A moment of absurdity amid the ledgers. You go to bed warm, tired, hopeful. And in the dark, as your eyes drift closed, you realize something. Royalty is not about the grand gestures. Not really. It's about the daily grind of keeping the world from falling apart. Quietly, constantly, without applause. You fall asleep, dreaming of lavender, of flower-dusted kitchens, and of your son, pen in hand, learning to read the world. Your feet ache before you even rise. You've been standing in court for hours again. Tomorrow will be the same, and yet you drag yourself from bed because today is important. Today, the portraits arrive. You've commissioned a set of them, your children, your husband, yourself, painted in rich robes with serene, inscrutable smiles. Each face captured in stiff poses and flattering light, because legacy matters. Weird historical fact. Royal portraits in the Middle Ages were rarely accurate. Artists were instructed to idealize their subjects, straighter noses, clearer skin, more majestic expressions. One queen famously demanded she be painted as beautiful as the Virgin Mary, or not at all. Your portrait has been delivered in a crate, sealed with red wax. You open it slowly. The woman in the painting wears your favorite emerald gown, her hands folded just so. Your eyes don't look tired. There are no lines on her face. Her expression is dignified, cold, like she's never laughed, never cried, never buried a child. You stare at it a long time. This isn't you. This is the myth of you. Historians still debate whether royal imagery shaped public perception or merely reflected it. You think it's both, a loop of expectations and performance painted in oil. You glance at your daughter's portrait next. She's wearing a crown too large for her head. She looks as though she's about to cry. You make a note to have it altered. As the day goes on, you attend a council meeting, settle a dispute about hunting rights, and approve the construction of a new bridge. You almost forget the portrait until supper. They hang it behind your seat in the hall. Guests nod, servants bow. Your husband looks up and mutters, "Good likeness." You smile, he's lying. After the feast, you retreat to the library. You rarely get time here anymore, but the smell of vellum and beeswax soothes you. You run your fingers along the spines of old chronicles, stories of queens long gone. You pause on one Empress Matilda. Matilda who fought tooth and nail to secure the throne for her son. who crossed frozen rivers, who escaped besieged castles disguised as a corpse. They called her proud, difficult, unwomanly. You call her familiar. Strange but true. When Matilda was denied the crown after her father's death, she launched a civil war that lasted over a decade. Her enemies mocked her ambition, but her son became King Henry II. You trace her name with your thumb and wonder what would she make of you. You've never fought a battle, but you've fought for peace, for stability, for your children, and for yourself. You close the book and whisper, "You were right not to yield." Outside, the stars are sharp in the sky. You walk to the chapel alone. You light a candle, not for saints, for the women like you, queens who bore 12 children, queens who outlived their kingdoms, queens who were traded like livestock and still managed to lead. You whisper their names: Margaret of Anjou, Eleanor of Castile, Blanche of Castile, Isabella of France. They weren't always kind or good or just, but they were there, in the rooms where it happened, in the margins of power. And like you, they were often reduced to portraits. The next morning, you call the artist back. You say, "This face is not my face. Paint the lines, keep the eyes tired. Let her look like someone who knows things." He hesitates. "Your Majesty, it won't be flattering." You smile. "Then it will be honest." That afternoon, your son asks why you spend so much time with books instead of hawking. You answer without thinking, because they listen better than courtiers. He laughs. You laugh with him. Another myth cracks, because royalty at its core is not about pageants or robes or immortal likenesses. It's about bearing witness to history, to grief, to your own story, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hidden behind a flattering frame. You return to your bedchamber that evening, passing your own face on the wall. You glance up at her. She doesn't smile back, but she nods. The bells toll again, but this time for you. No, you're not dead, not yet, but you've relinquished your crown. A younger generation now sits the throne. You've stepped down as queen, up as queen mother. Funny how the most powerful title a woman can earn is still just someone's mother. And yet, there's a strange relief in it. You rise later these days. Your joints creak. Your gowns weigh less. Your burdens even less so. No more war councils. No more goose-fattening schedules for the winter banquet. Just letters to write herbs, to sort and time. Finally, to be alone with your thoughts. Weird historical fact. Retired monarchs, especially widowed or deposed queens, often withdrew to convents, manors, or rural estates, where they could enjoy a quiet but still influential existence. Some, like Eleanor of Aquitaine, wielded more power in retirement than they ever did on the throne. You still have a voice, you just use it more sparingly now. And when your children visit, they listen. Your eldest son speaks to you about alliances and border troubles. You offer calm advice. He says he values your wisdom. You believe him. Your daughter, now a queen in her own right, asks about childbirth, about diplomacy, about whether she's doing it all well enough. You remind her of the lavender fields. She understands. You once thought you'd die in silk under a vaulted ceiling with Latin prayers ringing in your ears. Instead, you sit in a garden with a warm cloak around your shoulders, watching the bees trace lazy paths through marigolds. There is nothing grand here, only peace. Historians still debate whether these royal retirements were genuine retreats or thinly veiled exiles. You think the truth, as always, is somewhere in between. Occasionally, messengers arrive with news from court scandals, assassinations, marriages. You shake your head, pour another cup of wine, and say to the cat, I remember when that Duke was still in swaddling clothes. The cat, as always, is unimpressed. Sometimes you walk through the great hall. The tapestries remain. Your portrait hangs there, newly repainted. This one is older, realer. You allowed the artist to show the laugh lines, the thin lips, the wisdom in your eyes. Visitors look at her with more curiosity than reverence. She looks like a woman who's seen things, because she has. Strange but true. Some retired queens secretly kept court long after stepping down, guiding policy through letters, liaisons, and sheer gravitas. Queen Margaret of Denmark, for instance, ruled as regent until her death decades after her formal retirement. One evening, a storm rolls in. You gather with your remaining family in the solar. Candles flicker. Rain slaps the stained glass. You tell stories, some true, some embellished, of the times when you ruled. Your granddaughter listens most attentively. She asks, "Were you ever afraid?" You pause. Then say, "Every single day." She nods, satisfied. Fear, it seems, is something she understands. But you also tell her this courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and ruling anyway. She writes it down. She will be queen one day. Maybe a better one than you. Maybe not. But she'll remember this moment. And that's legacy, not marble statues or dusty chronicles, but words spoken in candlelight to someone who needs them. Later that night, you return to your chamber. You light one final candle for all the queens before you, the ones with names carved in stone, and the ones lost to time. You whisper thanks. Then slowly you crawl into bed. The room is silent, save for wind brushing the shutters and the soft breath of slumbering dogs at your feet. You pull the covers over your shoulders and close your eyes. You're not a queen now, not really. You're a woman who lived. You loved, ruled, failed, won, wept, and carried it all with more grace than anyone knew. You drift into dreams, not of coronations or conquest, but of spring, a lavender field, bare feet, your sister laughing in the distance. The world goes quiet, and finally you rest. And so concludes the long, strange, and deeply human life of a medieval royal, perhaps not with a sword raised high, or a final decree echoing through marble halls, but in a quiet room, wrapped in soft linen, with memories whispering more loudly than any courtier ever dared. In the flickering candlelight of history, we see not the myth, but the woman, the queen, the consort, the mother, the person, one who ruled when it was demanded, who yielded when it was wise, and who endured even when it was nearly unbearable. For all the gold-threaded gowns and ruby-studded crowns, she was still someone who cried in secret, who felt the weight of duty heavier than any scepter, and who occasionally wondered what it might be like to just walk out of the castle and live a quiet life. But even in silence, even in retreat, her influence remained. In laws passed in daughters, raised in sons, forged by her fire. Her legacy was never truly the crown, it was continuity. Grace under pressure, wisdom learned in dark corners and sunlit gardens alike. We imagine medieval queens as distant figures, stiff and perfect. But if you listen closely, you'll hear their footsteps in your own life, the echo of decisions made with trembling hands of resilience, forged through years, not legend. Tonight as you rest, remember this history isn't only written in wars and treaties. It's written in quiet strength in lavender fields and in the long exhale of someone who finally gets to sleep. It begins with a letter. A messenger arrives just before dawn, cloaked in dust and urgency. His boots are torn, his horse trembling. You're not even dressed yet, your hair still damp from the morning basin, when he drops to one knee and hands you the parchment sealed in green wax. You break it open. It's from your daughter. She's 16, married off to a duke in a northern realm you can barely pronounce. The letter is polite careful, too careful. She writes of snow, of feasts, of a new hound that reminds her of the one she left behind. She says she is content. You've taught her well. You sit by the fire, reading between the lines. You know how to recognize a cry for help, wrapped in diplomacy. She's homesick. She's lonely. She's scared. Weird historical fact. Some royal daughters were married as young as 12 to foreign rulers, and many never saw their birth families again. Letters were censored. Visits, rare emotions expected to be managed. You want to respond immediately, but how do you say, "I miss you" in political code? You settle on, "The lavender from our gardens is blooming again." I trust you remember the scent. She will. It was your secret signal for comfort, for home. You remember your own first marriage, the foreign palace, the unfamiliar tongue, the way everyone stared, measuring your fertility before your personality. You weren't a person, you were a treaty in silk. Your daughter is now walking the same path. Historians still debate whether queens had genuine influence in arranging their daughters' fates, or if they merely softened the blow. You tried. You negotiated the terms. You asked for more leniency, more tutors, more room for her own choices. The men smiled. They said yes, then ignored you. Your lady-in-waiting asks if you're unwell. You nod. Just tired. Always tired. But there's no time for rest. Another daughter's match must be finalized this week. The Spanish ambassador is already sharpening his quill. You meet him in the solar. He wears too much perfume, speaks in half-truths and compliments. You match him smile for smile. The conversation dances around dowries, titles, naval alliances. He asks whether your second daughter has a temperament for diplomacy. You resist the urge to say she's 14 and still believes in unicorns. Instead, you say she will learn. He nods approvingly. He thinks you're naive. You're not. Strange, but true. One French princess was given a wedding trousseau so large it required 3 ships to transport. Yet she spent her wedding night alone in a drafty chamber because her husband was off hunting. You've learned to navigate this world by keeping score in your head, who's gained favor, who's lost influence, who might cause trouble if insulted over pudding. But no amount of courtly maneuvering makes it easier to hand your child off to a stranger. You've lost children to disease, war, miscarriage. Now you lose them to treaties. One by one, you send them away with stitched banners and choreographed farewells. They wave from gilded carriages, and then gone. No one ever says it aloud, but it's true the crown has a habit of devouring its own young. Later that night, you receive another letter, this one from your youngest son. He's in training at a distant fortress. He writes in messy Latin and asks if hawks like fish. You laugh out loud. The sound startles your maid. She hasn't heard it in days. You write back, only the cleverest one. He will be clever, you think, if the world lets him. In your private chamber, there's a little box. Inside it are scraps. Notes from your children, locks of hair, a carved whistle, a pebble shaped like a heart. Nothing valuable, everything priceless. You hold the whistle between your fingers. You remember the day it was gifted to you, muddy hands, proud grin, the sweet squeak it made when blown. You can still hear it in your mind above the din of diplomacy and duty. That's what they never tell you about royalty. The real heartbreak isn't war or scandal. It's watching your children become pawns in the same game that's crushed you for decades, and still pretending it's what's best. But tonight, just for tonight, you don't pretend. You sit in your nightdress hair unbraided and let yourself ache. You whisper your daughter's names, you whisper your son's, and with a heart full of ink-stained letters and vanished lullabies, you close your eyes and dream of a kingdom where queens don't have to give everything away to keep the peace. The castle stirs before the sun. You wake to the sound of church bells tolling not for mass, but for war. Your husband is already gone. The royal guard has mobilized. Armor clinks in the corridors. War horses stamp in the outer yard. The kitchen is boiling eggs and sharpening knives. This is what readiness looks like in a medieval palace, organized chaos wrapped in velvet. You wrap yourself in your thickest cloak and descend to the council chamber. You've been here before too many times. A border skirmish, a noble's insult, a bishop's prophecy. Some spark has ignited the tinderbox, and now the entire court reeks of urgency and oiled steel. Weird historical fact, the 100 Years' War misnamed as it technically lasted 116 years. Saw monarchs, especially queens, like Isabella of France, make battlefield decisions and manage diplomacy while kings were absent or incapacitated. This time, the king insists on leading the charge. You try to dissuade him gently. Let our son go in your stead. The realm needs continuity, not bravado. He paces, he sulks, he says something about legacy. You say nothing because you know this isn't about strategy, it's about pride. And pride kills more kings than daggers ever could. Historians still debate whether queens acted as regents out of genuine authority or as placeholders until male heirs matured. Either way, when the king rode off to war, you became the realm. He leaves at dawn. You stand on the battlements and watch the dust rise behind his retinue. Then you turn to face the real battlefield governing. Within hours, you're dealing with everything from court pensions to pig shortages. A merchant claims your tax collectors are corrupt. A baker begs forgiveness for using sawdust in the bread. A bishop argues that a comet sighting justifies raising tithes. You want to scream. Instead, you smile. Let's consult the astronomers. That's politics never say no when you can say later. You hold council in the throne room, though you never sit on the throne. That would be too bold, too queenly. No, you take the chair beside it, the one they always leave for a consort warm, but never quite powerful. And yet, the court listens to you, because when war comes, they know who really keeps the gears turning. You remember Queen Melisenda of Jerusalem ruling solo after her husband's death in the 12th century. Not out of ambition, but necessity. They called her the light of the realm. You're not interested in being a light. You just don't want the realm to burn down. That night, your son sneaks into your chamber. He's barely 13, but he speaks like he's older. He asks if he'll have to fight too. You brush the hair from his eyes and say, "Not yet." He doesn't believe you. He's already memorizing troop movements and siege formations. Childhood ends quickly in castles. Strange but true. Some royal children were knighted at age 7 and led troops before they turned 15. You draft letters to every surrounding noble, urging loyalty, offering grain, promising honor. You reassign guards to watch the treasury. You order extra rations to be stored in the old granary. You tell your steward to lock the wine cellar. There's always one baron who drinks too much when war drums start beating. Every night you dream of different disasters. The city burning, the river drying up, your son falling on a battlefield in a place you'll never see. And then you wake up and govern again. The worst part isn't the stress, it's the silence. The court is quieter without the king. No boisterous laughter in the halls. No thudding boots or drunken songs. just the whisper of parchment and the scratch of your quill. Still you manage. You meet with envoys. You send food to villages. You overrule 3 corrupt officials in a single afternoon. You even organize a feast, small, respectful enough to lift morale without seeming too celebratory. The castle breathes again, just a little, and then weeks later news comes. Your husband has been wounded. The messenger bows his head. The court gasps. You do not. You excuse yourself and walk calmly to the chapel. There beneath a flickering candle you whisper, "Let him live, but let him return wiser." It's not the prayer of a saint, but it's the honest prayer of a queen. In the coming days, you do what queens have always done in wartime. You endure. You command. You weep in private and lead in public. When he returns, limping bitter but alive, you welcome him with a smile. You host a banquet. You dress in crimson, the color of victory. You sit beside him and raise a goblet to the wisdom of survival. And just for a moment, he meets your eyes and knows. He might wear the crown, but you held the kingdom.